Reactionary design is when a game developer decides in the spur of the moment to tackle some kind of issue in their game, typically a broken mechanic. Most competitive gaming players have probably heard of the term hotfix, which is a quick change to one tiny thing rather than waiting till the next patch cycle. This type of thing happens in card games a lot too, mostly in the form of erratas, but there's all kinds of weird reaction-based choices companies can make. Force of Will has had plenty of erratas in its day, but there's only a few things they've done that I would truly call reactionary. The first drastic reaction-based changes the game made were with Reflect Refrain. I remember when these two came out. They seemed pretty strong, and I honestly couldn't understand the weird amount of players that thought these two wouldn't be busted. At this point in the game, the main dominating decks were very strong aggro variants with Knights of the Round Table or Leviathan and Bahamut. If you opened properly, it was possible to smack your opponent for 2700 damage on turn 1. That seems almost paltry now thanks to the short stint of Prissy OTK decks that were running around a few months ago, but control and utility at the time had been pushed out. The Wonder Twins were like a weird answer to that. They were a splashable ruler that benefited not using a strategy that revolved around making your J-Ruler a turn 1 killing machine, but instead added consistency and power to other deck types. Turns out they added too much utility though, and they were swiftly eroded to have their ruler side abilities only activatable on the player's turn, rather than both theirs and their opponent's. This didn't change much though, and even after being slightly tuned down, the dynamic duo continued to dominate top 8s everywhere. A lot of the online community was calling for a ban on them, as these two dominated every top 8 like I said before, and just about invalidated every other ruler because of it. See, the main problem with Refrain is that she's impossible to kill. She doesn't have text like Fox or Book that says this card can't be destroyed, but instead has the ability to flip back over to a ruler side on your opponent's turn for free. As much as she wants. There are no hard once per turn clauses in Force of Will, and this means that a zero resource ability could be spammed as much as you want. This also meant that Refrain could dodge the J-Ruler killing Blazer without any issues at all and keep doing her thing on the following turn. In fact, the only way to actually kill her was a super stupid convoluted combo that required you to run Arla, the Almeria Special Stone from Grim Cluster, and Artemis Bow to give Refrain flying on their turn and then blow them up that way. To rectify this, Force of Will co-printed one of the single dumbest cards the game has ever had, Black Moonbeam. For 2 Darkness Will, you could destroy a J-Ruler, and also this card can't be chased. 2-cost J-Ruler destruction is already pretty damn cheap, but the unchaseable part is what makes me think that this was a reactionary card. Aha, look at this card, Refrain, go fuck yourself, now you're dead! Well, shit. Turns out this card did nothing though, and if anything it only made Reflect Refrain stronger. See, your opponent can only have 1 J-Ruler, so running Moonbeam at 4 would be silly. Refrain has the ability to search any card from the deck, which means in a mirror, the first Refrain to flip over would win off of being able to grab Moonbeam first. This also made it so Reflect Refrain had a guaranteed win against most other J-Ruler decks. With Moonbeam having completely backfired, Force of Will just outright banned the twins from New Frontiers, but left Moonbeam. Unchaseability is one of the dumbest aspects in this game. It removes interaction, and I have a hard time believing this card was originally this cheap or potent when it was first drafted. Honestly, it would have just been easier to slap a once per turn clause on Refrain, or simply make it so Refrain has to rest herself to flip back over. While it doesn't fix the problems that Reflect and Refrain caused, it would have done more than Moonbeam did. J-Ruler decks were entirely invalidated for New Frontiers while Alice Cluster was around. The only J-Ruler that was able to thrive was Overlord Valentina, and that's purely because she was able to abuse the rules to her advantage. You see, after she died on her J-Ruler side, she can retain all of the God's Arts granted to her by her J-Ruler automatic ability, essentially making her a utility and control card rather than a huge beat stick with every regalia imaginable. Even with this, though, Darkness had been a dominant force in the game since Moonbeam's printing. It took a ruler who was more inherently busted and could generate a stupid amount of resource, field, and hand advantage to finally start offsetting the control-based meta we'd been stuck in for several months. Prissy OTK and Myths had become such a huge problem that once again the company had to break out the ban list they hate to so much and remove Problem Regalia, which were also cards from Alice Cluster. And you know, it actually kind of slowed things down and left room for slower combo-based decks to come back into power. Is when I would say Force of Wilco didn't do the exact same thing that happened with Moonbeam. This is Severing Winds. It's a 4-cost counterspell that cancels anything. Sounds expensive, right? Well, you can play it for absolutely nothing if your opponent has played 2 or more cards this turn. This was meant to counteract spinning Myths, which Prissy abused thanks to the card's Torrent ability to grab a stone for free, and then her own ability to give things flying and swiftness when a fire or wind stone is called into play. Know what happened? This pretty much died. Know what else happened? Any deck that intends to play more than one card a turn has to deal with the frustration that a resource-free counterspell might be hitting them simply for playing the game. This is another spell where I don't actually believe it was printed the way it was originally drafted. If this was a 4-cost spell that got reduced to 2 green or 2 void with the Torrent ability, it would be much fairer. The problem then would be that it was no longer an answer to myth spam outside of a few decks that could quickly ramp and catch pace with it. Okay, so I wasn't really sure how to end this video other than saying that I want to stop telling myself this game has growing pains. Unchaseability and giving something a free cast based on common situations are dumb. When you end up with something like Refractor Frame or Myth decks, your response shouldn't be to try and print a 1-card answer to the problem, but instead make everything in the following sets power creep it out. Well, that's my 2 cents on what I think are some of the most poorly designed cards this game has ever had. What are your thoughts on things like this? Do you think game companies like Force of Will should print specific answers to problems, or look for other ways to solve extreme power creep?